Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics with a really special tutorial for you today. I found a pattern actually made in Australia called the Tenderness Pincushion by Lilabelle Lane Creations by Sharon Burgess. I thought these amazing pincushions, you can see this from the overhead camera, were just extraordinary. I'm like, oh my gosh, we need to get this here. And I asked if I could teach you most of the elements of how to make this amazing pincushion, and graciously they've allowed me to do that. So I'll be leaving out certain measurements, of course, to protect the intellectual property of the pattern. But this is amazing because you know what, as quilters and makers, we're pinning all the time. You know, if you've watched any of our tutorials, that pinning is one of the essential elements to getting a really precise quilt block. And so having at least one pincushion very readily available by that sewing machine is key. And I'm discovering I have magnetic pincushions, I have regular pincushions, and I want them sturdy. I am using them. This particular pincushion has not only function but beauty. It's amazing. And we're going to be doing some English paper piecing, a very fun and efficient way that is different than traditional paper piecing if you've ever done that. And if you've never done that, no worries at all. We'll talk you through the process today. This is such a nice, dense pincushion. When you're putting your pin in, it's not flying off the table. I have made those types of pincushions that were filled with polyfill and had like no density, and I put my pin in and off it goes. These have 3 full bags of the Plum Easy walnut shells in them. These are an incredible grade of a walnut shell. We have the unscented or lavender. Maybe you want, I love the scent of lavender. If you want a strong scent, pick up 3 bags of that. Maybe you want a lighter scent. Maybe you want 2 unscented, 1 lavender, whatever you want. You'll need 3 bags of that. And we're going to use every single drop of that in making our pincushion, which I'll show you a little bit later on. So included in your pattern, it's much more than a pattern. What you also get, it's amazing, are the templates needed. And I'll be showing you exactly how to use each of these, and the English paper pieces that are made out of a good heavy cardstock, and enough to make more than 1 pincushion, and we'll be able to reuse them. So I love that, very generous with the kit of putting in more than enough papers and these really nice solid acrylic templates that I'm going to show you how to use right now. So when you're getting ready to make your pincushion, by the way, this is Resplendent. This is a beautiful collection, as you can see. It's just rich and vibrant. This is Jason Yenter in the beginning, amazing designer. We couldn't resist making the Sophie tote. And as you can see, you know, it's beautiful, maybe as a bag to use around town or to decorate and dress up your sewing room. So one of the things that you want to look for, if maybe this isn't your colors, maybe you just want to buy the pattern templates and papers and do your own thing. You're always looking for a fabric that has a very distinct, repeatable pattern that you can fussy cut, that gives you that kaleidoscope look. It's kind of blooming from the middle. You can see the one that they did here. I believe those are some Tilda fabrics. And I think it's going to be really fun to see what you do. We'd love to see you post. Maybe you're going to do your own fabrics, your Tenderness pincushion, and the fabrics that you choose. But if you'll be joining us for this kit, I'll be, of course, using those fabrics today. So we want to talk about how do we manage this. So let's talk about those templates first and the engineering kind of behind them and how you use them. So I'm going to grab just a plain piece of paper right now, and let's look at our first template. They're really all the same in that we're going to try to zero in on this. If we can't get it from the overhead, we'll be certainly bringing you a close-up image. I want to point out here that maybe it's easier to see from this side. It kind of is. You see where those holes are? We're not going to be really using the holes, But do you see the line that goes between them? And that's a dash line. That dash line and everything inside that dash line is what you're going to see on the top of your pincushion. Everything outside of the dash line is your seam allowance, and that's going to tuck under. So let me get a shape for you and show you what I'm talking about. This one I've already cut out, and we'll talk about how do you strategize where to cut in your fabric. You can see that my template fits right over that. Well, that's when the papers come into play, and we will certainly be turning our shapes over, gluing that to the back, and everything's folding behind like this. So in the end, that footprint that I talked about, see that right there? Those dashed lines, just frame it right there. That dashed line, when you envision where to fussy cut your fabric, either the Resplendent collection or your collection at home or something else you found on the website, just know that everything inside that dashed line is what you're going to get in each of your blooms, and you're trying to fussy cut your fabric in that exact same position every single time. Which leads me now to kind of our next section of how do you examine your fabric to know where to cut. That's the fun part. You get to pick where is that spot. So let's bring out our fabric and we can look at that. Now, we chose this location. Maybe you have something you prefer. That's the fun part. Make it your own. Let me just get a little bit of space. We found that, of course, your fussy cutting, you're cutting around this is very smooth. It's very slippery. This is where the no-slip grip dots, these are great. These are great for any ruler that you don't want that slipping, that moving away. As we know with creative grid rulers, they come equipped with grips on the back, but most acrylic templates do not. That's where you can supplement putting some of the grips on the back. And we certainly did that. And I'm just going to show you these upside down. We didn't need the big full circles. We just cut some of those in quarters or halves. And even that little small circle in the middle, you could be using as well. Now, when I push down on this, it is not going anywhere. Before that, it's kind of all over the place, and I'm very likely to make a cutting error. So the ones I will be using with you today already have those grips. So let me put those aside. I just wanted to show you that you do get one set of those, but I wanted to show you the ones that we use have the grips on them, and that's just because we don't want anything to move. All right, so looking at our fabric, this is my finished shape. You can see that I just chose, it was just a place I had picked that I'm like, yeah, I really want to have kind of my spot in here. You want to plan your fabric out. You can even just kind of lay out the designated kind of in the area so that you manage and use your fabric strategically. You want to, don't just dive into the middle of your fabric because you could end up running short depending on the cut you get and where you want to cut that. Let's say that you were in love with this motif. Fantastic. That's where we're going to lay this on here. Now look at this. Look at this portion right here. See how it's narrow? It blooms open and it comes to the point. Do you want this portion toward the middle? Flap that down. Or if we turn it around, now maybe you want this portion to be on the outer portion out here. See how that's fun? You get to choose what you want to do. Now we've already kind of chosen our destiny. We want to repeat what we've done. And so with that in mind, knowing this is what I'm going for, I will use my template. And I know I want to be, this is kind of right where I want to be. Let's see here. How do we do that? That's right. That direction is the direction we chose. So for me to repeat that, I'm kind of looking at some clues here. Looks like I'm kind of diving right into this portion. Let's see here. I'm going to be very, this is the most time-consuming part of this, is getting everything cut out in the exact position. You're kind of nudging things ever so slightly. See, I'm just seeing the part of that flower right there. I have the 2 white flowers, clearly see the 2 blue flowers, and then now I'm just starting to clip that. You see that right there? I'm just starting to get that. I want to center that. And you see how this right here, some clues? I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm just seeing that. That's how you manage this. Now, I know my next section is up here and my next section is up here. In order to be able to make a safe cut, I am just going to cut kind of around this and get this so that I can get control and get this away from the rest of the fabric. Put that aside. This is where you might choose a spinning mat. Let's try one. Let's try it with a spinning mat. You know, when I'm squaring something up, I absolutely use a spinning mat. Now I don't want to move that. I found my perfect spot. You would definitely want to do this on your spinning mat. That's okay. We'll reacquire our spot. I remember where we're going here with this. Remember how we had our 2 spots down here. We've got our points up here. We want to have those kind of curls very even. So now, this is a 20 millimeter rotary cutter. Now I don't have to touch anything. That's important. The least I move this fabric, the more likely I'm going to make an accurate cut. Now I think the spinning mat is a real, I wouldn't say it's absolutely essential, because with the grips down, I feel like I could turn that and the fabric's not going to move. But it is an insurance policy, and if you've already got a spinning mat, why not use that? Once we have our shape, now it's time to, of course, you cut out the rest of your shapes, all the same, and add sizing. Definitely add sizing before you press out that fabric. It'll help the next step so that we have a good solid crease. I've got the iron heating up to absolutely maximum heat, and we're going to grab our glue stick. Let's start off with our papers. And the first thing, we've already used this one. I want to show that to you. See that residue there? We already used that making this. We get to reuse our template. So I'm just going to put just a little bit of glue just in the beginning as I establish putting this down. What am I looking for? The same seam allowance all the way around the entire shape. And I can get my spinning mat out of the way now. This is the kind of new version of English paper piecing. English paper piecing, traditional English paper piecing, you would be running a basting stitch. You would be basting to these papers. That's how it works. And the very first English paper piece quilt I ever did, I did that. It's extremely time consuming, but also very satisfying. I really enjoyed the project. And you're just rolling this over with your fingers. That little flap right there, sometimes the way I manage that, I want to show you this so it doesn't peek through. Sometimes I come back and trim just a touch on an angle, and that'll prevent that flap from showing. And I'm going to put down a little bit more glue right there. Just a little bit more. This is the Soline glue, kind of fun. They have the different, this one's kind of pink. You've got some different colors, and they have the refills. So if you're looking for glue, that would work. Probably a regular old glue stick would work as well. This side, and then we'll do the very bottom as our last. This is in lieu of sewing to those papers and having to pull out those basting stitches later. So now I like to set that crease. I'm going to just come onto the fabric with a very hot iron and let all of that really create the crease. The whole idea here is that when we remove the paper, the memory of that crease is in place. Again, with traditional English paper piecing, You would now hand sew these elements together with the papers in place, like this. This would have the paper in place. You would be right sides together and running the most narrow little stitch, trying not to catch those papers. Assemble all of your shapes together and put them under the background and actually remove the paper later. We're not going to do that. We're going to go ahead and remove that paper. You can this is a precision stiletto from Clover. It's a great tool that kind of helps you to kind of get underneath there. Just like that. It's a really neat tool. It's got the point on one end. This rubber tip, if you can totally take the heat of an iron, which is amazing. If you're ever trying to open a seam and you're having difficulty, this is a great tool, and that's the other side of this tool. So if you're wondering, what's the other side of that tool for? It's a really nice grip that is heat resistant, and you really can't use it with your iron, and that's pretty unique, a tool. So once you get this removed, once you kind of have it like this and you can get a portion going, you just are gentle with the template, pull it out, and now you're ready to make another pincushion. So the first thing I like to do is kind of go back right away. Make sure everything is kind of back down. Remember that crease, that memory I talked about? It's there. That happened. And I believe we had added sizing to this fabric that helps that stay. I'm going to kind of get that going, and then I'm going to flip that over. And let's repress that. Very good. Okay, so now you'll of course repeat that. We have a total of 6 petals like this. We have, of course, our center hexagon. Let me grab that out. Same thing, no different there. And then these petals here, it's kind of fun on that one. What we're going to do on this particular fabric, because you can see that kind of slides underneath here. All we did, in fact, let me get one of these, show it to you. We just turned the 2 sides, but we left that end open. Why turn that under? That's going to scoot under this and be completely hidden. So this one's really quick to do because you're not doing these 2 sides at all. So you'll prepare 6 of those as well. So let's get all of our shapes out here. We are very close to now getting ready to, we can put our templates aside. In fact, let me just clean up a touch. There's less for both of us to look at. And we're going to move on to how do we prepare our background fabric to receive our fabric now, and we start building our layout. So let's put everything over here. We've got that. And we have our shapes here. We found that one of the things that was really helpful is adding a little bit of interfacing to the fabric. We're going to use these pincushions, right? We built this thing to use, maybe to give for somebody else to use. We want this thing to hold up over time. So one of the first things that we're going to do, we have our background fabric, which everything is going to be basically appliqued and sewn to. And this is kind of just a bonus. This is a lightweight interfacing. I'm going to iron my fabric out first. I think that was kind of folded up. Let's do that. And we're going to add that interfacing right now. And we went ahead and added interfacing to really everything. The sides of the pincushion, the bottom of the pincushion to reinforce. This is a lot of weight. You know, as you move your pincushion from place to place, it helps it keeps its form and its structure. So let's iron that down. And we also found that adding the interfacing didn't create any resistance as we were putting the pins in and out of the pincushion. It also helps to keep, you know, especially as we're using these pincushions all day, as you can imagine at Shabby, we use these all day. We don't want to create any holes where all of a sudden now the shells are coming out of the pincushion. So this creates yet another barrier, so that can't happen. All right, we have that stitched down. One of the first things that I want to have you do, and I'll give you a couple of approaches, is inside the Tenderness pincushion. Notice we have this nice circle shape. Where's that coming from? they have a beautiful diagram in here that you could absolutely just take a piece of the freezer paper, which is how I initially did it. I had a light box underneath it, and I don't have that on the set with me, but I had my light box. I laid this over the top, and I could see my lines, and I drew my semicircle and my line, and then I flipped my paper around and matched up the lines, and I drew the other half. That was how I did it, and then I just simply cut out on the circle. But we found a really cool tool that if you prefer this approach, will give you the perfect circle. You don't even have to cut this out. So the only thing you might want to consider doing if you are going to be using the circle cutter, because we're going to be using most of the paper, and if you get off center, you could be off the paper, is this is 8.5 by 11. Let's just go mark our center for that at 4 1/4, and by 11 would mean 5.5. And let's just mark the back. I'm going to use the correct side of that ruler. There's my 5.5 right there. And we'll mark that. Not necessarily essential, but I want to be right on that so that when I do use my circle cutter, I'm not off my paper. This is the Cut-Rite freezer paper. I think I said that, but in case I didn't. Okay, this is an Olfa circle cutter. You can make that any length you want, obviously up to a limit. You have a couple elements here. This is the very sharp. You're always going to want to keep track of that cap there. Very, very sharp. And then on this end, you're just going to squeeze in, hopefully you can see that, and expose the blade. So it's a one-handed tool. When I first started using this tool, I was like over controlling this product, thinking that I had to kind of hold it with both hands, and it really didn't work well. Oh, I was making a lot of ovals, not so many circles. So how you'll use this is you're going to put that point exactly in your center, and you're pushing down, and you want to definitely just keep things moving. And now you have that circle cut. Let's see if we got a clean cut. I think we did. Maybe I'm off just a little bit there. I think rather than try to reattempt that small little spot, let me put that back on. I'm just going to pull that away, and I think we're just fine. So when I was initially using the circle cutter, I wasn't pushing hard enough. So if you're finding that is the case, you know, push just a little bit harder. Okay, so now everything, of course, is going to be placed onto this background. What are we going to do with this circle? So we have our square here of our background, and I'm just going to draw a couple lines. Our circle's going to be in here. That's our top, and all of our English paper piece elements are going to be right here. This part out here is going to be cut away, so I have no worries about marking on there with a marking tool at this time. So this is a 10-inch background there, but I'm just going to mark some lines here that are going to help me just line up. I know this is all going to be cut away. I'm going to do the same thing in this orientation here. That's going to help me get things lined up. You can see you want to have that equidistance of that beautiful light blue, and this is going to just help you line up. There's a lot of ways you could approach this project. This is just one idea. So now as I place my circle down, notice how I have a little bit of assistance now. See how my lines are lining up with that. That's good news. Drop that down just a touch. So I've got this horizontal and vertical, and now I'm just going to draw around that. Let me turn that just a touch. This is, I'm right in the middle of my background. Where we put that point, I'm going to push right through that. I want to mark that. I'm going to mark that really good in there. Okay, what I recommend you do, you want to get the center hexagon lined up, and everything else will fall into place. So I'm going to use my north and south lines here running right to the center, and I'm just going to mark a little bit. Remember, this is all going to be covered up with fabric. This is helping us to establish that very first piece that's going to go down. That's our hexagon, and helping us get everything lined up. I'm going to draw that a little bit profounder here. Okay, we're really kind of done with this for a bit, and maybe for the whole project. Once you have this, let's start with that hexagon. So let's look and see what we have here. Okay, so I'm going to turn it. So it's probably a little bit easier if I start here on this nice flat side. And you can see, it's very easy to see the sides, right? Point to point. But you're like, where's the middle of this? Just give it a little crease. Just a finger crease is probably all that's needed. I'm going to get my glue ready. We're going to definitely be using the glue to get things down to the background. And remember, the mission of the glue is just to hold it together till I can get to the sewing machine. That's what's ultimately going to be holding that down. So we're just going to be adding some glue. Let me turn that. I think I'll do that off of there so I don't put, if I miss it. This is where kind of wax paper, fabric you're not concerned about, that if you get a little bit of glue on there, is no big deal. So I've got my kind of finger pressed center. That's lining up on that kind of north-south line. Right there. And of course, I've got these lines left and right. Once you establish the middle, the rest is easy peasy. Now we'll simply come in, and you see how these are just going to lock right into place. There is no other place for that shape to be. And so I just want to show you this layout, how this is going to work. And the reason we can't completely glue these petals down yet, and that's because of those little ones that are going to slip right kind of into these gaps, right? They're going to slip into that gap like that. And you're trying to expose kind of the equal amount of that. That's all you're trying to get done. So when I glued mine together, I knew that if I put a center kind of stripe up the middle, I was safe. So let's go do that. I'll just show you how I put that together. And we can always go back and put in more glue. And I see my point is heading right north right there. Everything outside the circle is going to be cut away. Just like that. Remember, this is open. Why? Because we need to get our little extra wedge there in the corner. Let's put a stripe again right up the middle for now. We'll put more on. I know when I made the sample, I put all of these on, and then later on, but just for that sake, this is why I left that open. See how I can now see it's lining up with those points, those close over. If I'm like, you know, I really want to bring that out more, do it. That's fine. You can bring that out as much as you want. Obviously, there's a limit, right? Because we didn't turn that edge under. Certainly don't want to expose that raw edge there. But I'm going to pull that back so I can make sure that I'm jetting out at that angle. If you are concerned about and you want that to be exactly running at that angle, you could certainly put a ruler on there and do that if you want to. So I'm going to keep building basically our bloom, getting everything glued down, and our next step will be to bring this to the sewing machine. We're going to zigzag around everything as you kind of take a good look at this. You can see we used beautiful kind of dark teal thread on this. But if you're using your own fabric at home, you might be using a really colorful collection where you can't settle on one color. And that's where you might want to either use the clear monofilament or that smoke colored monofilament. So that's just an option for you. All right, I'll keep stitching everything, gluing everything down. And then once that's done, we will head over to our sewing machine. So I'm just coming in on my last shape here. Let's Just make sure that everything looks good. Squeezing that in. Isn't that? It's already pretty. Haven't even sewn anything together yet. I love that. Oh, we need to put that in the corner. What are we doing here, Jennifer? Okay. I'm like, we're missing a shape. We certainly are. Let's make sure that's where we want that to be. And I decided to tuck mine in. Here I kind of brought them out a little bit more. I thought it's kind of pretty to tuck that in. Again, style, whatever you want to do. Let's glue all that down really well. I'm looking at the lines now, the circle and the lines that I drew, and I'm now wishing I had drawn that with a permanent, like a micron, because I can already see I really want to press this, and I am going to press this. If you lose any of your lines, try to keep some of your lines so you don't have to kind of reestablish everything. But as you know, with a friction pen, that's going to disappear. So let's see if we can kind of finesse our way into the interior portion of this. I think we can, without getting rid of those lines. That'll basically be our cut line. Once we have everything stitched down, we'll be cutting out on that circle. But as I said, in hindsight, I would definitely put like a micron pen. It's a cut line. These can be in a micron pen. And then you don't have to worry about touching those with the iron. Okay, everything is down and ready to go. I have my machine. Of course, you're going to want to test this out on your own machine. I have a width of a 1.2. I have a length of a 0.8. It's a really tiny zigzag. Test that out. And let's look at our project here. If there's any areas, it looks like that's one I didn't put any glue on that one. This is a good chance to do that. Our goal is to just kind of have that hold its position so that when we're coming in with our zigzag, nothing's moving around. Okay, there we go. So, you know, we're going to look at this. Maybe you want to start on the interior and then come down here and go around that, and then maybe come back and do that. However you want to do that, however you manage kind of getting that stitched down, that's what we're trying to get accomplished. So I'll go ahead and get started on that. I'm sewing with a 20C actually in my BERNINA. I'm sewing on the 770 today, thanks to BERNINA letting us use their amazing machines. And let's get started. Okay, everything is sewn down. Sometimes it's easier to check from the back. It should look like that. As I started stitching, I remember I gave you the 1.2 stitch width. I found that was just a little narrow. I did increase that. I think I increased that to a 1.5. That's where, again, find your preference on your machine. Our next step of our pattern is to cut on the drawn line. You could go back to the circle cutter if you have absolute full confidence. You can find the center again. I wouldn't recommend that. We've done a lot of work, right? You could certainly use your rotary cutter or a pair of really sharp scissors. You know, whatever that is for you. I'm very comfortable with the rotary cutter. I'm just going to come in and get right on that line, cutting as precisely as I can. Okay, Whew, we made it. Let's press that out. Let's give that a really good press. I've been wanting to do that and not have to worry about those drawn lines and the friction pen disappearing. If that happens, that's no problem. Remeasure, draw them back, not the end of the world. Our top is done. So now let's look at the rest of the architecture of our pincushion. We have this beautiful coordinating fabric that's around the edge, and you'll have that strip. Of course, you're cutting that out per the measurements in the pattern. And again, like I mentioned before, we went ahead and put interfacing on the back of that before we cut that out. You'll have your strip, and we'll just place that right side together. Let's go. So I need to go back to a straight stitch now. In fact, I'm going to change out my presser foot. I want to put a 1/4 inch back into my foot. I want to put the straight stitch plate back into my foot, setting myself up for success for the rest of my project. So I'll go ahead and do that now, and we'll break for just a moment, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back at my machine. I have my 97D in and my straight stitch plate, and I'm back to my normal length here. I've got a 2/0, actually a little bit shorter than normal. I want to put a lot of stitches in this distance. This is going to take a lot of pressure as we add our walnut shells. We're using this over the years. So whenever I know I really just need something to stand the test of time, I shorten my stitch length. Let's sew a good 1/4 inch seam allowance. Reinforcing that. In fact, I might even just go back and do that one more time. We know that anytime we're going to be using something as hard as our pincushion, we want to give it a little more oomph and strength. Okay, we know that's a good solid seam now for sure. And we'll press that seam open. That will be helpful for us. Our next step of our pattern, if you envision this, let me just turn this right side out. I want you to see kind of where are we going? How are we going to do this? What's the goal? The goal is to somehow attach the top of this circle to that. How are we going to possibly do that, right? So let's start off with marking our shape in quadrants. That's going to be really helpful for us to have some places to line up. So we have our nice north-south. We're going to just put some lines in there. Remember, there's going to be a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Remember if I said before, like I wished I'd used a micron pen, a permanent pen, so when I would iron that down, I wasn't worried about interfering. This is when you want to use a friction pen and just stay inside that 1/4 inch seam allowance. We're just trying to get a little bit of line up here. And I'm lining up there. So where I'm looking at, I've got my line right here, and I'm just going between my points. I'm going to mark my 1/4. So that's going to help me. And we're going to do the same with this. Okay, we know that seam is going to be one of the 1/4s. Let's flip across to the other side of that. Let's mark that and mark our 2 ends. Why we're doing that, it just helps you evenly distribute this band because we're going to be placing this right side together. I have one dart here and one dart here. I simply line them up, okay? So you can see that we're going to sew this and flip this to the outside. This is where the pins are going to come into play and play a really big role in this. So the next place I'm just going to pin now is going to be those points. I'm going to pin in all 4 of those quadrants first. They have to hit there, and then everything else will be filled in the gap. I thought that was a really clever instruction inside their pattern. Make sure it's all going to fit. Just like that. And now it's just a matter, a lot of pins going in. In fact, let me show you this part of the pattern. See this part right here where all of those pins in? That's what we're doing, a lot. So I'm going to get busy. We'll probably, you know, so you're not having to watch me pin, but I'm going to pin very frequently so that we're trying to get this as flush as we can, right? Without taking any tucks. Let the tucks be out here. You will see this before I go sew anything. I want to show you how many pins I have in there to get that edge flush and now kind of trap those tucks up here and not in my 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so you can see that I definitely put in a lot of pins here. Another thing I kind of discovered as I was, it's funny when you make a project the second time, you start going, hey, maybe that's a simpler approach. On a couple of areas where I couldn't make the two edges kind of want to stay together, I put a little bit of the glue strip kind of in the seam allowance. That worked really great. So that may be an option for you as well. I'll show you what I'm talking about here. Is like right in here, maybe you're having a struggle with that. You know, you could pull that back and put just a touch of glue, maybe right there. And it's in the seam allowance. Why not, right? And kind of squeeze that together, and then the pin is just trying to reinforce. So we're going to go to the sewing machine. I'm again on that shorter stitch length 2, maybe a 1/8. We want to put a lot of stitches in here. This is going to, of course, that kind of side wall of our project is going to take quite a bit of stress as we use it over the years as we add our walnut shells. So let's get started. I'm going to turn that stitch length down to maybe about a 1/8, and we will sew a 1/4 inch all the way around. Okay, wow, the clover patchwork pins are getting a workout. Flower head pins, if you've seen those before, a great option as well on this one. Would certainly do a great job. So we'll remove all of the pins. Now, the back of our pincushion is actually made of 2 pieces. I'll bring those out and we'll sew that together. And that's where we'll be adding, of course, our walnut shells. But that's what this is going to look like so far. Looks a little bit funny, but that's where we are currently. So let's just look at that. This is kind of one. Notice this is looking just like this so far, right? There's 2 pieces back here. I wanted to show those to you. This is the 2 halves. Let's just look at that. Also the interfacing. And we have our 2 rectangles, and notice we've drawn a line. We're going to be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that's not a place I'm really comfortable with. So by all means, draw that 1/2 inch seam allowance, because I know I can sew on a line, leaving about a 3 inch opening. And we'll simply place those right side together. Definitely reinforce this. Start here, back stitch and come off, and then cut that. And again, probably starting, or start here if you want, but you're needing to reinforce that. This is where all the walnut shells are going to go in. Hey, let's just sew that together. And you can see this step. Okay, I think my iron cooled off while I was sewing that one piece on. That's fine, I'll get that warming up. You can see we opted to kind of push that seam allowance to one side just to add a little strength versus pressing that seam open. Your choice, that's just what we kind of opted to do on that one. I'll give that just a little bit of a press. And as you can see, we need that to be in a circle. It's not going to work if that's not in the same circle. So we're going to once again bring our shape out. And if you just kind of know that's going to be your center point, and you have the equidistant here. You've got your line up. I'm just going to draw around that. I get nervous with the circle cutter because I'm not that, it's not second nature to me yet. If you're real comfortable with it, you could absolutely put that circle cutter on there and just cut this out. That's not me yet. I want to get that comfortable. But again, I'll go back and cut this out. Okay. Remember that part where we marked our 4? Same thing, right? We already know we have these 2 spots. Easy enough to go ahead and mark the others. I'm just going to use that as my guide there. And we'll just mark that. And let's go back to this. You know, we can see our spots right there, our marks. I'm just going to mark across from that. We already know that one. There's my mark right there. I'll just mark straight up from that. There's my mark. I'll mark straight up from that. And just like before, you are just, the whole goal here is to marry up those spots. There's a seam right there. There's a line right there. I'm going to pin, pin, pin. I'm going to pin my 4 sections and then everything in between, just like I did before. It's kind of a more time-consuming process to get everything nice and pinned. And again, sewing a 1/4 inch seam allowance on a shortened stitch length that adds strength and durability over time. Once you've done that, this is where you are, right? You've created a kind of almost looks like a drum. This is where it's really fun to add in all of our amazing walnut shells. And let me get everything out of the way. It can make a mess. Super fun, but of course the first thing that we need to do is turn our project right side out. Now I can see I didn't maybe quite leave my 3-inch opening. I know that the bigger opening I make, the more I have to hand sew, but you know, I need that real estate to get this turned through. That wasn't too bad though. I don't think I had quite the 3-inch opening, but you know, don't worry about the fact getting a point turner in there. This will absolutely fill out when we start adding our walnut shells. Now 2 kinds, Plum Easy, they have the best walnut shells I've ever found. I know they put them through a baking process. They're absolutely as I think they're kind of cosmetic grade, I think is what I've been told. There's an unscented, and I like lavender. That's my favorite. So if you love lavender, you could grab 3 packages of lavender. It'd be, you know, smelling wonderful in your sewing room. Or maybe if you want a more subtle scent, you maybe want a couple unscented and maybe 1 lavender. Grab that and a funnel. I just grabbed this from the dollar store. You'll need 3 full bags. Every bit of that will go in here. You might want a cookie tray. As careful as I try to be, somehow I always seem to make a bit of a mess. They have a nice perforation. You can just kind of take that and tear that away. I'll risk it. I'll just kind of start pouring in this first one. And then on subsequent ones, I'll probably start using the funnel. You have to kind of work it around. Oh, it smells, I wish you could smell this. It smells amazing. I know these have lavender buds and lavender oil from France in here. Amazing. So I'm going to pour that in. And once I get all 3 bags in there and worked through, I'll talk you through how to close the opening and your pincushion will be done. Okay. So the first 2 bags I definitely put in, and the 3rd I got about half of it. And then I made a mess and I'm like, it's time for the funnel, which is obviously slower. And you see how I work it around, getting in those little nooks and crannies to fill this out all the way. We're going to get every bit of this in this pincushion. Wow, it's amazing. We're almost there. We made it. Okay, 3 empty bags, a very full pincushion. Let's work that in with our fingers. And of course, you can work it again once you get everything closed. Okay. All right. So remember how we pushed all the seams on those 2 back flaps to that one side? That's that fold, and I'm pushing that fabric so that I have this kind of overlap. I really want that. Just another insurance policy. I'm going to put my pins down along that seam. And I've got a clover needle. It could be a Richard Hemming needle, whatever you want to sew with. And I've doubled up my thread. And I'll show you that real quick. I'm just going to put those down to kind of hold that opening closed. So I took a long strand and I just threaded that. So I've got a loop down here. I don't want a knot. Here's why. I'm going to come in underneath here, just like this, and I want to catch that loop. I don't want a knot because that knot could come undone, especially over time. So now we're just going to come in and close that opening with, you know, if you've got quilting thread, maybe you do some hand quilting, great option. This is where we're going to spend some time to get it closed. And of course, you know, you get the idea. I could be here for quite some time because I've got to go this distance and I don't want to take big stitches. So that's really all there is. I wish I could, you know what, I will stitch this. Again, we'll kind of fade. I'll come back. I want to show you how to tie this off and my idea of where to kind of bury that knot in the end, right? We have to tie that off in the end and how to do that so we're sure we're not going to come apart in time. So I'll just keep stitching that closed and I'll catch up with you on my very last stitch. Okay, I'm coming up on that last little stitch here. I can get rid of those pins now. So tying off, you know, you always want to kind of have that hidden but secure, because any place you begin or end a stitch, it could come undone. We all know that, and that's why we want to take extra steps. So in the very back here, notice I've got the loop. I don't know if you can see that. I'll try to pull it off to the side. I've got a loop. I'm going to scoot underneath that once, twice, probably 3 times. There it is, a second time. Let's go a third time. And of course, I don't want to pull my thread there so I don't unthread my needle. I don't want the end of this to be here. So I'm going to go underneath a distance here. You don't want to lose that needle. I have done this. I always admit to you all my embarrassing mistakes. Give it a good pull. Okay, and now the end of that is buried inside here, and we can flip it over. We're going to give it a good pat to help push all of our walnut shells. Isn't this beautiful? I love it. It's so functional and beautiful. Here's the other thing. You know, there's different types of pins, patchwork pins, flower head pins, hand embroidery pins. They all fit on here beautifully. You don't need to have separate pins for different, separate pin cushions for different pins because there's enough space for everything. So I hope you enjoyed learning really how fun and easy it is. You can get this accomplished, probably easy half-day project. How beautiful too to maybe give as a gift. So just a reminder, this was the Resplendent collection. Yardage available. Maybe you want to make some coordinating projects. We have the Sophie Tote limited kits with the Tenderness pincushion. But if you've got a collection at home you want to use, be sure to pick up the pattern. That will include those beautiful acrylic templates and all the papers. And we want to see your creation. Post that on our Facebook group. We'd love to see what you're working on. I'll see you soon on another Shabby video.